So the way I see it, over the recent weeks, both U.S. president candidates, Trump and Harris, they were showing their political agendas, and they're trying to show how completely different they are. And the moment one of them came to power, like everything will change. This is what they're saying. So my question to you is, are their agendas, is that different? And will it matter that much? Will it change that much as they paint?
Yes, it will. Again, I've encountered this a lot being an American expat. Nobody thinks it matters who the president is. Everybody says, oh, it's always the same. It's always the same. Yeah, if you don't live in the U.S. It does change in the U.S. In particular. I'll walk you through 5 areas where policy does change. And I do agree to an extent it doesn't change in all arenas. There are areas where policy is, again, largely similar. But walking you through the top 5 areas that I want to highlight: immigration, the judiciary, so the court system, culture, economic policy, and foreign policy. So I'll go very quickly through it. I don't want to do another lecture like I did in the last topic. Immigration. For Trump, for example, we all know where he stands in immigration. He's very hawkish on immigration, wants to limit particularly illegal immigration. What did he do as president? He built part of a wall for $15 billion, negotiated a policy called Remain in Mexico, which forced asylum seekers to remain in Mexico to process their asylum claims in the U.S. First time this happened. And then Mexico, even as part of that agreement, deployed 15,000 soldiers to the border with the U.S. to prevent people, from migrants, from coming across the border into the U.S. Okay, that's point 1. And then again, he did a lot of things with H-1B visas, whatever. Anyways, the result of that was illegal border crossings in particular, and I want to go over numbers again because it's important. 2017, about 300,000 illegal migrants crossed over into the border.
Per year.
In 2017. So border encounters, illegal border encounters. 300,000 people in 2017. 2018, 400,000 people. 2019, 900,000 people. 2020, 400,000 people. Okay, so all under a million, most of those years under 500,000, okay? Biden comes to office. So we say things don't change. Well, sometimes things change a lot. February of 2021, Biden eliminates the Remain in Mexico policy and says he also would not enforce something called Title 42, which was something that was an American policy to turn back unaccompanied minors at the border. So if you were a minor, you were under 18, you showed up without your parents or guardians, the Biden administration said, we won't turn you away. Instead, we will have you come into the country and we'll process your situation. Illegal border crossings under Joe Biden. 2021, 1.6 million. 2022, 2.2 million, an all-time high. 2023, 2 million. So I need to double check about 2022 being all-time high, but again, 1.6, 2.2, 2 million. Huge change, okay? Judiciary, Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices. That obviously had an impact because it overturned and it changed. There was a lot of rulings that were pretty, consequential, including, very importantly, Roe versus Wade, which I don't know if you've heard of. I'm sure probably quite a few people listening would have heard of. That was the 1973 ruling that guaranteed a woman's right to an abortion.
Yeah.
So that was overturned because Trump was able to appoint Supreme Court justices because he was the president. Obviously, a huge policy shift. So the judiciary does matter. Culture. Trump banned transgender adults from the military, for example. He said he would work to remove transgender women from women's sports. He's talked about declaring healthcare providers that provide gender transition treatments to minors as being ineligible for federal funding. Huge cultural shift. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris wants to pass the Equality Act, which would add to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prevent discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, etc. My point is, big distinction. On the economy, it is relatively similar. I actually do agree with you. Trump cut corporate tax rates. Fine. But the biggest area is around energy. So again, Trump deregulated oil and gas activity on public land. He signed a bunch of tariffs. Again, signed new trade deals, etc. But that being said, Biden hasn't opposed most of that agenda. He signed the CHIPS Act to boost manufacturing for chip research and things like that. The Inflation Reduction Act, which gave a bunch of money to green energy. But the biggest distinction there is on energy. So the Democrats and Biden like green energy. Trump, is not, he's not as into...
Doesn't care that much.
Yeah, he's more traditional energy. Fine. Foreign policy, again, some changes. Obama, for example, signed the Iran deal in 2015. Trump withdrew from the Iran deal and imposed sanctions in 2018. But, so that's one distinction. China, Trump was pretty hawkish, initiated all these tariffs. There was a trade war, etc. Biden kept most of those tariffs. When it comes to Russia, for example, Trump says he wants to be friendly with Russia, but in reality, he did provide lethal weaponry to the Ukrainians for the first time in 2019. So again, how big of a difference on foreign policy is it? That I would maybe agree. Things don't change all that much. So again, Abraham Accords, that was under Trump. Biden wants to expand that. So my only point here is domestically, inside the country, absolutely things change. And it's very important and consequential to Americans in the country. Foreign policy, however, when you're dealing with considerations and American strategic interests, I think that's something that both parties agree on more. And by and large, always will, right? I mean, some of these things, whether it's the alliance network you have, whether it's core countries that are of vital interest, I don't think those things change that much. So when people criticize, oh, the elections don't matter, I think that's what they're referring to. But no, I think the elections definitely matter. Just it depends on the issue you're talking about.
Okay.
What's your take?
Interesting. I must say I partly agree with you.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to disagree.
No. I partly agree with you, and there are different reasons on that. So first, I agree with you that mostly in foreign policy, most likely it won't change that easily and won't change that much because, yeah, I agree. There are alliances, network, and different governmental interests that have been there for ages, and you don't change them that easily, that much. So, for example, I hardly can believe in a situation where Trump comes to power and comes to the office, not to power, to the office, and
say both.
Okay, and says we are not interested in the Middle East anymore, or something like we're not interested in, I don't know, in supporting European security anymore, or something like that. He will claim some of this in different to different extent, but I think it won't change that much. So in this, I agree with you. I agree that also domestically, when of course like you have more leverages to play with your political system, it will change more. And also, I think there is another argument is if you like again the way I understand how it works. It will be the last term for Trump, and it will be the first term for Harris, potentially. So if he comes to power, he will not be thinking about whether I'm going to be reelected or something like that. So he will feel more free in order to do whatever they want. That's what I think. I think, like I read the research where they compared the terms of the presidents who served for 2 terms in a row or like combined in America, and the researchers always found that the second term were always more bolder from their actions perspective because they didn't care about being reelected. So again, I think that will add up that it might change. It might change. But then I was reading a very interesting article from The Economist. It's called The Trumpification of American Policy. And basically the guys, what they did is like they compared the announced agendas of both candidates, and they highlighted almost everything that you highlighted, but from different perspective. So the main take out of this, and I found it very interesting. I'm not sure it's like 100% true or not, but at least I find it very interesting. Is like Harris, she like most likely she will continue the Biden's course, but at the same time, they don't want to change a lot of changes that Trump made recently in his first term. And this, for example, comes to tariffs in relations to China. Like they will do it in a different way potentially, but the overall perspective and overall guideline remain the same. Like we will not ease the trade with China or something like that. So there will still be limitations, there will still be tariffs and all of this, and all the taxation, like I think tariffs we call it.
Yep.
Yeah. So it remains. Then when it comes to immigration, there is a big difference, but like Trump is like super hard anti-immigration guy for everything. And as far as I understand, Biden was more like carrot and stick. We will let these immigrants to come, but we will try to like prevent some other immigrant groups from coming to the U.S. So trying to keep it more or less balanced, but I know the numbers that you just mentioned.
And that was
I
illegal
know.
immigration, by the way, not legal immigration.
Yeah. Okay. Then, yeah, and another thing that where I found a very big difference in their agenda is when it comes to corporate taxation, because as far as I understand, again, Trump's idea is to kind of lift a lot of tax burden from corporations, like to reduce the corporate taxes, while Biden and Harris, they just want to, on the contrary, increase it. This is the big difference, of course. This is a big difference. But again, I hardly can imagine the situation where Trump comes to power and say like, okay, now you have what's the corporate tax like now? Around 21%. Okay, now you'll have 5 or like 5 or 15, something like that. Like I don't think it will be that radical even if he comes to power. While at the same time, when Harris come to the office, I don't believe that she will say like, now we're going to be 50%. Yeah, so it won't be very radical. So. My take on this is the following: when they claim the agendas to be super different, it's not that different as it might seem from the media, because there is still some how you say it. There is like they use each other legacy anyway when it comes to legislation. So I don't think it's like they flipping the coin completely. And again, I think you've heard it multiple times from different people from different regions. But I think the biggest difference of American political system versus many others, like from this region or let's say from Russia or from other more autocratic regimes, political systems, is that one man's opinion is not that heavy as in the autocratic regimes. True. Yeah, so you have these checks and balances. So when you take the autocracy and one leader changes, comes to power instead of the other, then you have a radical change of the system. So when you have the checks and balances, yes, there will be changes, but not that radical.
Yeah, and again, I think broadly, I don't think we're really disagreeing on this. I think basically we're aligned. Again, I think internally the country changed a lot more than it does externally. The image shown within is much different than the image shown, I think, externally. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting what happens, and I think it's going to be particularly relevant for Americans living in the country. But again, for me as an expat, is my life going to change whatsoever? No, I would imagine not. But nonetheless, I think, again, considering how influential the U.S. is economically, militarily, et cetera, I think it's, of course, interesting, and we'll see what happens.